Honorable members of the committee, I see a quorum.
Of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motion, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate. We can now proceed to the election of the chair. Pursuant to the Standing Order 1062, the chair must be a member of the official opposition. I am now ready to receive motions for the chair. Mr. Brassard?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I want to designate Mr. Pat Kelly to be elected as chair of the committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Brassard.
Brassard, that Pat Kelly be elected chair of the committee. Y a-t-il d'autres motions?
Are there any other motions?
By the House, I should put the motion to the question, and I should go with a recorded vote unless there's obvious consent of the committee. Is it the will of the committee to adopt that Mr. Kelly be elected chair of the committee? Yes. Consent? Motion agreed, and I declare Mr. Kelly duly elected chair of the committee.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this, your confidence in me to chair this very important standing committee, and it's a real pleasure to rejoin this committee. I spent a couple of years on the ethics committee. In fact, it was my first committee assignment after I was elected in 2015. So I'm delighted to be back and look forward to serving all members of the committee as your chair. So if the committee is in agreement, I will proceed to the election of the vice chairs. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House of Commons Order of November 25th. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, committee clerk will do their best to maintain a consolidated order. I'll just also take this opportunity to remind participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Perhaps I'll just dispense with the rest of that part, and we will just proceed directly to the election of the vice chairs. So the first vice chair will be a member of the governing party's side, and I will open the floor to nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chair, I've raised my hand.
Okay. Are you nominating yourself, or are you nominating a member of?
No, I choose to nominate a colleague.
Okay, please go ahead. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is my first time joining this committee, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, even though it is virtually this week. And I certainly do hope we can work collaboratively on the important matters that are tabled at this committee to study as we move forward. For today, I would like to nominate my colleague, Ms. Ikra Khalid, as vice chair of this committee.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ikra Khalid is nominated. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, I would again put it to the committee. If there is agreement that we'll dispense with a recorded vote. If there is agreement among the committee, I declare Ikra Khalid vice chair of the committee. And second vice chair, I would go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to nominate Mr. René Villeneuve be elected second vice chair.
Excuse-moi, j'ai dit Villeneuve, Villemur.
Villemur. Mr. Villemur. Pardon me.
There are no other nominees for the second vice chair, so I will declare that Monsieur Villemeux is second vice chair. If it's the will of the room here, then I'm going to proceed to the routine motions. We have a number of them to go through this morning, and I hope that we can go through this fairly quickly. So first routine motion, and this would have been distributed to most members of the committee. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
As we haven't established ground rules, I'm just wondering if I could provide you with notice at the appropriate time. I also have some motions that are outside the routine committee motions as well.
I understand that there are members of the committee that do have outside motions, and so I will add you to that for that. When we are finished with the routine motions, then I will go to other motions that may arise from the floor. And I'm going to ask, though, for a motion then on analyst services. These motions were distributed to the committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Respectfully, I believe that it's members that would propose the routine motions.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking
Thank
for.
you.
So go right ahead if you'd like to lead us off with the first one.
I think I'll let my colleague, Ms. Hefner, do it.
So just to be clear, I'm just reading the first motion, right? That the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist it in its work.
Okay, thank you. That motion is moved. Any all in favor? Okay, thank you. Carried. Oh yes, and so at this moment I can now invite the analysts to join me at the table, or join the table. Yes, you may.
For the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure, that the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be established and be composed of a certain number of members that I don't have here. The chair, one member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Thank you.
How many?
I'm going to just ask that maybe if you want to rephrase that to make sure that it's clear where you were moving that it be composed of 5 members.
Thank you.
Okay.
That the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, one member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor of adopting the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Carried.
That the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the government party. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
That the chair be authorized to hold meetings and receive and publish evidence when a quorum, sorry, which, could you?
Meeting without quorum? Is
right. Provided at least 4 members are present, including 1 member of the opposition and 1 member of the government?
Sure.
Okay, if I got that correctly. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed?
Sorry, just to seek clarification, are we saying 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of government? Or 1?
It says 2 here, but I was just reading.
I believe that last year it was 1, but now the whips agreed together.
Okay, well, this will be up to the members, and we may end up needing a quick moment here. The routine motion that is typically passed would be one, or it was adopted in the last Parliament, was 1 and 1. Okay, but you're, sorry, Ms. Hefner, you said 2 and 2, which if we have, we might need some discussion on this. Is that 2 and 2? Is that acceptable?
Just have a minute there, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah. If it's the will of the committee, I'm going to maybe suspend, if that's all right, this routine motion and carry on with the others while we perhaps members may want to confer with their whip staff. If that's acceptable, I'm going to move on to the next routine motion. Okay, go ahead.
So time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. That witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statement, that whenever possible, witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance, that at the discretion of the chair during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party, as follows for the first round. Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, New Democratic Party 2.5 minutes, Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes.
Okay, discussion on that, is that acceptable? In the previous Parliament, this differentiates from the previous Parliament in a little bit in that it was 5 to 7 was adopted before in terms of minutes, but it's going to be up to the committee if we want to accept it as moved. Any objection?
No.
Okay, carried.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I also have routine motions that I would like to put before we get to the next one on notice of motions. It's regarding witnesses.
Okay, this is in the.
It's not in your list. It's a routine motion that I would like to add.
Okay, you have the floor, Mr. Green, for your motion under witnesses. Go ahead.
Thank you. That each party represented on the committee be entitled to select one witness per 2-hour witness panel.
Okay, so you're moving that each party can do so. Are there any discussion on that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if the member can explain a little bit the logic behind that, and also, you know, if the member was going to propose it, it would have been nice for all of us to have had it in writing beforehand, including the member from the bloc in a translated version as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, may I respond to that?
You may.
As this is the inaugural initial meeting, there's no requirement for notices of motion. This is a routine motion, particularly for this committee, the rationale being that hearing from a diverse group of witnesses is a vital party of committee work. So whether these committees are doing their own studies or reviewing a bill that has been passed in the second reading by the House, if witnesses are apportioned based on the proportional makeup of the House and the committee, roughly half of the witnesses will come from the government, and the opposition will have to split the other half. So in last Parliament, this rotation was put place through an opposition motion sponsored by Michelle Rempel-Garner, which instructed the Health Committee to study COVID-19, and it worked. We found it worked very well. And so we would also like at this committee the opportunity to have input on the selection of witnesses.
Okay, are there any, I'm going to go to the question if there's no discussion. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question which I would have is, if I'm not certain if I understand the import, is that each opposition party will be able to introduce, propose a witness who will therefore have 2 hours of testimony before the committee. I'm just trying to figure that out, and if that's the case, would that unduly lengthen the amount of time. Usually when we ask for witnesses to come, usually they appear in a panel.
Yep.
And that panel is during a regular meeting of the committee, and that time is split up as opposed to having one witness for a certain period of time. I'm just wondering if the honourable member could, Mr. Green could...
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I'll happy to restate the motion, and that will give perhaps some time for translation. And I'll do it slowly so that everybody can gather it. That each party represented on the committee be entitled to select one witness per 2-hour witness panel. So this would be shared in apportionment to the makeup of the committee.
Go ahead, Monsieur Villemort.
This is the first time that I'm at this committee. This might be obvious, but I thought that there were only witnesses for 1 hour, that a panel was 1 hour, not 2 hours. It depends, is the answer.
Witnesses, though. Otherwise, we won't.
Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit wary, to be honest. I mean, in my past 6 years as participant in various committees, we've always come to a consensus around the witnesses that we bring in to testify. And also, I mean, what if a witness can't make it for 2 hours? Does that mean that we're violating the rules of the committee? And I would really hope that instead of putting these type of requests into law, into how our committee functions, I would hope that we could play it by ear in a discretionary fashion based on each individual study that we go through, and really work with that spirit of collaboration instead of dictating exactly how many witnesses, what party, and how many minutes that witness is going to be presenting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Then I'd hope to, I think, try and wrap up the discussion if we can. I mean, it's up to members, but we've a number of routine motions that I would like to make sure we get through quickly. So go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
Peut-être, Monsieur le Président, je peux...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I can offer a solution. I also sit on another committee. I sit on the procedure committee. And there were interesting discussions on PROC, discussions between all of the whips of each of the political parties. And there were some discussions to determine the fundamental rules and regulations. And at the time, no one mentioned this amendment to the motions. So maybe we could go back to what Mr. Brassard, what we've done with Mr. Brassard. We could just wait a little bit, enable the whips to talk about this, and we could maybe move to another motion in the meantime.
Yes, I'm fascinated by all the interventions today. It's good to be back, and I think this is going to be a very interesting committee. What I would say, Mr. Chair, through you to the members of this committee, is that each committee are the masters of its own domain. We don't have to wait for PROC. If that was the case, then why would we have independent committees anyways? We would just, basically concede everything to the whips, and 300 members of parliament could go home. So what I would ask is that this motion is on the table, and I would like to test the will of this committee. And I think, again, having the ability in a minority situation, I don't believe in consensus in this committee. I think that we're going to be working on straight up votes. So I'll just put that out there. And we're going to need each and every vote, each and every time. So, what I would like to do is test the will of this committee. And then when that's done, I'd like to put another motion. Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, then Mr. Brassard.
I just wanted to say, Mr. Chair, that there is a reason for which these motions exist. They're called routine motions because they are motions that we can find in all of the committees of the House of Commons, and that's why the whips agreed upon this. And I think they agreed very well upon several files to ensure that everyone was able to voice their opinion around the table. Of course, each committee is master of its destiny. But, Mr. Chair, we shouldn't exaggerate here. This is just a routine motion, and I think that when it's a routine motion, there are routine motions that are common motions that we find on each committee, and I hope I'm reaching out to my colleague with an olive branch, and I'm hoping that the whip's office will be able to determine the outcome of this and see if they agree upon this specific motion.
And I really would like to
Thank you,
to
Mr.
deal with
Chair.
this one way or another.
I'd like to take Mr. Green up on his offer and put it to the committee and find out what the will, so I call the vote.
Well, all right. I was going to say that there it did not appear that there was consent unanimously anyway to defer this, so we'll have a recorded vote on, or at least I'll ask the room right now, all those in
Recorded vote.
Okay, we'll have a recorded vote on Mr. Green's motion. Indeed, and I guess to be clear, that there is no more debate. Is there a further debate on this motion? Okay.
Ben, écoute, ça commence pas bien.
It's not starting very well.
I just want to, I want to reference in the routine motions for folks who may have been around for a long time or what have you, the next motion that we're about to do will set in stone how we're going to operate motions. And so if I had waited to put these, what I believe to be routine motions, which constitute the framework and the operations of this committee, then there was an opportunity where in the next motion on notice of motions, I would have been bound by that. So, I don't want to get too far afoot on this, but there is a procedural order in which this stuff happens, and it is quite right that I moved this motion at this time to ensure that I didn't get any other opinions or interpretations as to what it might look like in terms of the time requirements for a notice of motion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked in the beginning about the importance of working together and of collaborating and cooperating together. So I'm not a person who is not, I'm not an unreasonable person, but I must say to propose surprise motions like this when we weren't able to discuss it beforehand and when the documents were not translated in both official languages, well, I thought that there was a certain agreement between the whips. The whips had agreed about how things would unfold, and we will see how this will work. If you want to vote on everything each time, we will see. But I just don't see why we shouldn't give the committee a bit more time so we can think about all of the implications. This won't change anything. Next time that we meet, it will be adopted if everybody agrees on it. If people vote in favor. I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to waste the committee's time, but I'm ready to do so if we can't just have a little moment to discuss this amongst ourselves, or to wait a little bit, because we are reasonable people. This could carry on, and it would be very unfortunate. This is not something that I want to do. I don't want to waste the time of the committee. I want to have the opportunity to think about this and to explore the implications of this motion. And I want the whip's offices to have the chance to discuss this. So I am hoping that we will be able to be reasonable, Mr. Green. It will probably be adopted regardless.
To be clear, are you moving to adjourn debate on Mr. Green's motion?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No,
you had said that you had hoped that it sounded like that's kind of where you were heading.
No, Mr. Chair. I just want us to suspend the debate. We can set this aside, set the motion aside. We can go back to the other motions, and we could come back to this motion once the whip's offices get the opportunity to discuss this motion. there was an agreement between all of the whips. They had agreed about these routine motions that we're adopting today. I have no problem with tweaking a motion when it is reasonable, but this is a new motion. I was not a member of the special committee that Mr. Green sat on, and I didn't see any other committee that would have adopted this motion. If things worked out so well in the other parliament, then why isn't it in a routine motion now? It has not been proposed as a routine motion. No one even talked about this. It wasn't addressed beforehand.
So I'm not comfortable. I want to have more time. If it's adopted through a majority, then it's going to happen at the next meeting, and there's nothing I can do about it. However, I would like to be able to discuss this for a bit.
Debate, we'll proceed to the vote on the motion.
Listen, I would like to hear comments from the others.
I've exhausted, and I would like to go to the vote. Ms. Kelly, you would like to speak on Mr. Green's motion?
Yes, absolutely. Over the past 6 years, as we go through studies, as we try to do our committee work, it's been the nature of committees that I've sat on in the past for us to come up with witness lists together as a subcommittee, perhaps on agenda, and really discuss and iron out how and what the scope of XYZ study is going to be, and who we'd like to hear from, always giving opportunity to each party to be able to put forward witnesses that are going to add to the substance and the enhancement of whatever study that it is that we're working on. So I always am very wary of when we try to kind of limit and box ourselves in and don't leave that discretion up to committee members based on studies, based on how we as a committee operate. I really appreciate and I would hope that we can continue, as I have over the past 6 years, to work in a spirit of collaboration with members on an issue-by-issue basis and continue to make things work. And I understand that the governing party and the government does not have the chair in this committee, but I think this committee has the potential to really tackle the challenges of our time, especially when it comes to privacy, when it comes to access of information, and when we think about and really work on those issues that the scope of the committee is really about, I think such a motion would limit how we are able to continue with those studies. So I also, like my colleague Mr. Fergus, would like to think about what the implications of such a motion is going to be in terms of limiting what witness, what party, how much time, or expanding what witness, what party, and how much time. And so, this is, I would also like to perhaps put this aside for a little bit and move on to the next motion, and see if we can work through those as we mull over what Mr. Green's motion really means.
Ms. Sachs, and then Ms. Sachs, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. My opening statement today in my first time in this committee was a genuine interest and desire for collaborative work in this committee. I was excited to join this group. I came from Environment Committee and Foreign Affairs previous to this, and there's deep work that is concerning to privacy and other important issues that matter to Canadians in the work of this House. And the value of collaborative work with our whips in leading into the work in this room is that we set structure. so that even in times whether we hold the position of chair as the government or we don't, that the work that we do matters and how we move through that work also matters. And similar as to the previous motion and meeting without quorum that my colleague Ms. Hefner read out, and we decided to set aside to seek clarification and in an effort to move this committee forward today in what are routine and standard motions. I think it would be in the same spirit of that collaborative work and setting the tone of this committee that we do the same thing with regards to Mr. Green's motion at this time. No one likes surprises. No one likes motions that are just put on the table without receiving them with even prior notice or translation to our colleagues from the block or other members of the committee who English is not their first language. And it doesn't set a tone of collaborative work. We will disagree on many things here, but nevertheless, to set out to the gate this way without discussion on what is an important piece of the structure of how we move through the studies and the information and the witnesses that we'll be working with here. Frankly, I'm a little bit disappointed, and I move to this discussion to be put to the side so that we can get through the routine motions that will structure this committee for the work that we do going forward. I think just in the spirit of the previous motion that we put to the side, we should be doing the same here.
So you are moving adjournment of debate on this motion?
At this time, yes.
Okay, that's not debatable, so we will go straight to a recorded vote on adjournment of the debate on Mr. Green's motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ms. Sachs moved to adjourn the debate on the motion moved by Mr. Green. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines on Zoom, can you hear me? I believe you are muted, sir. Mr. Baines, can you hear me? This is the clerk of the committee.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is the recorded vote. Ms. Sachs moved that the debate be adjourned on the motion moved by Mr. Green. So it is the recorded vote. Do you agree?
Okay, so I can't just put my hand up?
No. The chair called the vote.
He has to verbally indicate. I think that's what his question is.
Yeah, so I vote to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Yes, to adjourn the debate. Monsieur Fergus.
I'll vote to continue the debate.
Ms. Epfner.
I vote in favor of Ms. Sachs' motion. Thanks.
Ms. Khalid.
I vote in favor.
Ms. Sachs.
En faveur.
Mr. Brassard.
I vote no.
Mr. Couric.
I vote no.
Ms. Rood.
I vote no.
Monsieur Villemur.
D'accord pour l'ajournement.
I agree to the adjournment.
I oppose.
Yeas pour 5-5, nays contre 5-5.
Well, I vote to adjourn debate, and we will pick this up another time. So, if I may move to the
Mr. Chair, I have another motion.
Mr. Green, we have routine.
That's correct. I have
motions,
another
and
motion pertaining to committees. It's regarding in-camera committees, and it's a pretty germane one. So
Go
at this
ahead
time,
and
I'd like to
state
move
your
it.
motion.
Thank you very much. I do have this in 2 official languages, should anybody require. That the committee may meet in camera only for the following purposes. A, to consider a draft report. B, to attend briefings concerning national security. C, to consider lists of witnesses. D, for any other reason, with the unanimous consent of the committee. That all votes taken in camera, with the exception of votes regarding the consideration of draft reports, be recorded in the minutes of proceeding, including how each member voted when recorded votes are requested, and that any motion to sit in camera is debatable and amendable. Mr. Chair, there have been times in previous parliaments where the government has tried to move committee meetings in camera to force difficult issues and votes behind closed doors and to avoid public scrutiny.
Rappel au règlement.
Please go slower so that the interpreters can work. Thank you.
Did through you, just to make sure the honourable member also received a translated version?
Right, but you are reading them into the record, and we just ask you to
Happy to
go
go
at a pace
slow.
that the interpreters can
No
keep
problem.
up with.
No problem. So I will repeat
Yeah.
in the event that it missed its translation.
One moment while we ensure that the interpreters actually have the copy. Yeah. Carry on, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been times in previous parliaments where the government has tried to move committee meetings in camera to force difficult issues and votes behind closed doors and to avoid public scrutiny. Even in minority parliaments, where the government can't act unilaterally, there were times where this was attempted. And as a consequence, valuable committee time ended up being wasted debating this. For that reason, there is value to set out parameters at the front end and in routine motions that specify when in-camera meetings can take place. Otherwise, we may have be in situations where the work of the committee can be wasted in debating frivolous attempts to move in camera. Mr. Chair, we've heard in preceding comments on previous motions put how people are envisioning the nature of this committee to go. And I'll share with you, just so that we're clear, what my intention is at this committee is to provide a certain level of transparency and accountability to the proceedings of this government. This is a significant moment in time coming out of COVID, Mr. Chair, and there are going to be likely some very significant conversations. And as we've heard time and time again from the government side, sunshine is the best antiseptic. I would like to see this committee operate at the highest level of all committees pertaining to this House, with the highest levels of transparency and accountability, without attempts to filibuster or to frivolously move things in camera and out of the public eye. I would call upon all members of this committee to consider this motion in its seriousness, given our experience in the last minority parliament, to ensure that the discussions of this committee are done so in a way in which we know from the outset exactly how we're going to deal with matters pertaining to public interest within this committee. So this has been provided in both official languages, and I'm looking forward to hearing the remarks of members around this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Pursuant to Standing Order 67-1 and 67-2, I rule this motion out of order. On to back to the routine motions that we are on, and I'm going to ask now that if I could have a member of the from the floor proceed with the routine motions.
Thank you, Chair. For document distribution, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, provided the documents are in both official languages, and that the witnesses be advised accordingly.
One moment, please.
This one over there.
Do I? Oh, this is. I don't. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All those in favor of adopting the motion on distribution of documents? Okay, any opposed? Carried.
Working meals, that the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Travel, accommodation, and living expenses of witnesses. That if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Carried.
Access to in-camera meetings. That unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to be accompanied by 1 staff member at in-camera meetings, and that 1 additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
Those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Transcripts of in-camera meetings. That 1 copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analysts assigned to the committee also have access to the in-camera transcripts.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Notice of motion. That a 48-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motion to be moved in committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whips of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted if it was received no later than the deadline hour. And C, notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is holding meetings outside the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motion may be moved.
All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Carried.
Orders of reference from the House respecting bills. That in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, are we going to, that the clerk inform each witness, is that right? That the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House administration support team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests. And the linguistic review, I think that's part of the same order? No?
Excuse me.
Am I
believe you switched from one
I
motion
think
to
I
another
have
one.
my page out of order. Shall I start again on that one?
Please.
Orders of reference, and then we go to here? Okay. Thank you. So orders of reference from the House respecting bills. That in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill, which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. B, suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A, an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them.
All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed?
It was,
Carried.
I think it was just backwards. So I'll just clarify my technical test for witnesses. Is everyone on the same page? That the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Linguistic review, that all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department, members' offices, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is it now the appropriate time to present motions?
No, one moment. I have other motions. I want to make sure that I've dealt with our routine motions before we proceed. In fact, I'm going to need a moment to confer with the clerk. Okay, well, thank you very much for now concluding our routine motions. And I am going to entertain other motions at this time, and I have
How does that happen, Mr. Chair?
Sorry?
How is the speaking list created before we get to this section?
I had been informed that Mr. Broussard wished to move a motion, and then you informed me that you wished to also to move a motion, so I will go in that order. And it looks like Mr. Villemure has a motion as well. So I'm going to go with Mr. Broussard first.
Thank you.
And we'll proceed after that.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification before I do move my motion. There was one routine motion that we were to come back to with respect to the designation of 2 members and 2 members. Were we not supposed to do?
That's correct.
Okay.
Are we?
So
are we ready to return to that?
Yeah,
or
and
do you wish
just so you know, Chair, I was dealing with the wrong sheet at the time, so
Yeah.
now that I've got that clarified.
Okay. So if you wish to do that, let's knock that off first,
Okay,
and
yep.
then I'll go to you.
Sure.
And do we have a mover, or I guess we're resuming debate on the meeting without
without a quorum.
So may I have either you or perhaps Ms. Hefner?
So now, are we saying 2 members or 1 member? Two
Two.
members? Okay. So meeting without quorum, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the government party. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have a question, just a point of clarification. Now, when we say 2 members of the opposition parties, are we saying 2 different opposition parties or just any 2 members from the opposition benches?
The motion, as Ms. Hefner has delivered it, refers to opposition. It does not refer to opposition parties. So I would take that to be any members that are members of an opposition party. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. And now, Mr. Broussard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to inform you that I have submitted to the clerk the motion that I'm going to be presenting in both official languages. And I move pursuant to Standing Order 108-3H, the committee undertake a study into issues of conflict of interest and the Lobbying Act in relation to pandemic spending, provided that A, the evidence and documentation received by the committee during the first and second sessions of the 43rd Parliament on the subject be taken into consideration by the committee in the current session. B, the committee adopt the report entitled Questions of Conflict of Interest in Lobbying in Relation to Pandemic Spending, originally adopted as the committee's second report in the second session of the 43rd Parliament. And C, dissenting or supplementary opinions be submitted electronically in both official languages to the clerk of the committee within 24 hours of the adoption of this motion.
Okay, this motion is in order. Thank you, Mr. Broussard. And one moment. Motion is debatable. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Broussard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. I've asked the clerk, and it's been 6 months since this committee has convened. Obviously, there was important work that was being done in the last Parliament as it related to pandemic spending and conflict of interests, and I'm asking for the committee to reestablish the report. We know that there's been almost $500 billion in pandemic spending that has occurred. And I think it's important for Canadians and indeed important for this committee to have the confidence that the pandemic spending has been done in an open, transparent, and accountable manner. And I'm asking for the committee's support on this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Broussard. I have Mr. Fergus.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Listen, I think there are two things that I'd like to say regarding this motion. First of all, it was already debated during last Parliament. I was part of this committee last time, and we had made a report about this, and a report was adopted. It was presented to the House of Commons, and it was accepted by the House of Commons. So it doesn't seem logical, Mr. Chair, to waste our time in this committee. There is a file that is very important to me. It's very important as a parliamentarian for me, and also as a member of the Black community. I really would like to talk about facial recognition. This motion was adopted by the committee, a motion about facial recognition. It was a study that was adopted by this committee during last Parliament. And because of all of these intense debates that were taking place during last Parliament, it didn't really reflect the priorities of Canadians, and unfortunately we weren't able to go ahead with the study on facial recognition. And I hope that we'll be able to do better this time, and that we will be serving Canadians, and we will be able to talk about this subject, because it really concerns a third of Canadians. And I hope that we will vote against the motion that has been proposed. I respect my colleague, Mr. Brassard, but I believe that it would just be stirring the pot one more time with this motion. I think we should move to something else.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and I do agree with my colleague, Mr. Fergus, that we do need to move on. I know that this issue has been hashed and rehashed, and we've discussed and over-discussed. And there has been a report that has already been published on this. And I really do think that it's time that we focus on things that are important to Canadians, that are for the well-being of Canadians. You know, my colleague here, Mr. Fergus, talked about facial recognition and its impact on racialized minorities, and I really would like to explore that concept. I would like to see how facial recognition, how artificial intelligence, and as a government, as private companies move towards more and more artificial intelligence, and how business is conducted, and how government is conducted, and how public service is conducted. I really think that there's an opportunity here for all members in this committee to really focus on how do we protect the privacy of Canadians, and how do we make sure that whatever services are being provided are done in an equitable way. I think we have a really good opportunity. We have the time. All that I would ask our members to do is to have the will to make sure that we are working on issues that are important to our time, that are important to Canadians, that impact Canadian lives each and every day. And I would really like to move forward on that. So I really encourage our colleagues around the table here to come together and to really focus on those issues that Canadians are really concerned about, that I know that members of this committee are really concerned about also. And I'm happy to work with my colleagues to draft such a motion, or to revisit other motions that were not able to see fruition in past Parliament. This, on the other hand, has been hashed and rehashed again and again and again. And I think that it's time that we moved past. I think it's time that we put aside this and really focus on the issues that Canadians care about, and that we as parliamentarians should be very, very concerned about in this committee, of access to information and privacy and ethics. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Monsieur Villemur.
A study has been produced, so I wonder what could be said. The motion is extremely vast, so I don't understand the intention of the motion. If I come back to the objective of the committee, Ms. Kelly and Mr. Fergus have talked about facial recognition. There are other issues, like the acts of China, for example, and they are using some information against Canadians. So what could we do? We are rehashing something, and I don't understand the validity of the motion.
Ms. Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As someone who's new to this committee and is familiar with the report from the previous committee, I feel a need to reiterate my intention in coming to this table with all of you from all sides of the aisle in the House, that we're here to do important work for Canadians on key issues that that many Canadians feel vulnerable about in terms of privacy and access to information. My colleague, Mr. Fergus, mentioned in terms of facial recognition. You know, Canadians expect us to do that important work here. They don't want us to be rehashing what we've already come to conclusion about and wasting valuable time. And I have to say, I really am asking that we don't entertain such motions that stir the pot on reports that we've already reviewed and quite extensively, for broad motions on the table now that really don't allow us to do the important work that got tabled last time, and that colleagues and members of the chamber and Canadians are asking us to do this time around. And as someone who's new to this committee, I'm really not comfortable in bringing up old reports that have already been concluded. I'm looking forward to moving forward on the work in this committee.
All right. Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Broussard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I respectfully disagree with my colleagues. I think it is important. We obviously when the last session of Parliament ended. It ended unceremoniously, obviously with the June summer break and then the election being called. I do expect, and I expect that there should be members around this table who look to us to determine this level of accountability, transparency, and open government when it comes to this type of spending. Some of these measures have continued on over the summer, and the work that this committee was doing in the past Parliament, looking into the conflict of interest, looking into lobbying, that is the role of the Ethics Committee. And so I'm asking that not only do we look back at the report, but also look at what's happened subsequent to the election being, well, in advance of the election being called and then subsequent to the election being called. I think this is important information. And if you look similarly what we did in the House of Commons when the government reintroduced Bill C-4, it passed through all stages of the House, went back to where it was before, and the Senate passed it. So I think there's already precedent as it relates to that piece of legislation for this committee to look back to determine what new information is available to us and then allow not just the information from the past, but any new information to be presented to Canadians. That's what this is all about, and I think it's important, given, as I said, Mr. Chair, the amount of money that has been spent, the level of lobbying and the potential of conflict of interest. That is the role of the Ethics Committee, and I think we could spend at least a few days looking into that. Thank you.
Monsieur Villemot.
Inaudible for the interpreter.
Point of order.
Sorry.
Désolé, oui. J'aimerais que, merci le Président pour la parole.
Thank you.
If the member could speak a little bit slower, the audible is inaudible.
Okay.
And we would like to hear translation. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a comment first from the translator. So do we have?
C'est sans problème.
Okay, go ahead.
J'aimerais que.
I would like my colleague to be more clear. What does he want? What does he want? Anything different? Of course, there has been a lot of spending, but what is the intention of the motion? What does he want to accomplish? I have trouble understanding the usefulness to having a new report. I don't think it's worth it. So what is the intention of our colleague? Can you clarify, please?
Okay, Mr. Broussard, you have the floor.
I can, Mr. Chair, and not to restate what I stated earlier. I think there are some issues new issues that can come forward. If they're not, that's great. But we have the ability through this committee to call witnesses, to talk about pandemic spending, again, subject to accountability, making sure that Canadians are aware where that spending has gone. Any conflicts of interest that may have arisen over the period of the last several months that the committee hasn't been constituted, as well as looking into the Lobbying Act. I mean, we'll have the ability to call witnesses. We've got a lot of information, and it's been acknowledged that we have a lot of information available to us as a result of the previous Parliament. What new information can we add to that? I think that is the intent of what I'm proposing through this motion, and I don't think I can be any more clear than that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I'm at the end of my speaking list. Are there any other? Okay. Now I have Mr. Green and Mr. Villemot again, and you, Ms. Khalid? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to, get a sense from members around the table. These are interesting early indicators, I think, perhaps the direction that we might be taking within this committee. But I do think it, serves us to be reminded of just the massive amount of money that was transferred from government over the course of COVID. And one of the interesting discoveries that I had as a new member of Parliament was just how lax and opaque our lobbying registry is. And I think that it serves all Canadians to have a revisit on what has been the largest procurement process since World War II. Significant. Hundreds of billions of dollars have gone out. I'm unclear, given where we're at with COVID, if there is a more germane issue to this committee than what's before us today. It's significant. And I would hope that we would have an appetite to create a gold standard for procurement, for lobbying, for pulling back the veil on any potential for insider dealings or any types of improprieties. And what I would hope from the government side in this process is that they would be able to, every step along the way, provide a rationale, provide solid evidence to assure Canadians that the hundreds of billions of dollars that went out the back door were well accounted for. Mr. Chair, I was on government services and procurement and served with some members around this table. And I can share with you that the breakneck speed in which this government, Canada, indeed the world, had to respond to COVID, I think, from my observation at procurement, provided a very unusual set of circumstances, given the volume and the size and the scope of COVID in procurement coming out of the federal government. Things that were, rushed into line for the defense of Canadians. And I think that it's important for this committee to demonstrate over these next months and perhaps even few years a retroactive, honest and earnest accounting for the money that has gone out over the last 2 years. If we can't do that here in this committee now, or if we would prefer to gloss over and just somehow magically turn the page because the Prime Minister wanted to call an election, having prorogued from a whole other set of ethical transgressions, I think would be deemed fairly problematic to the Canadian public. So we've been returned to this Parliament, Mr. Chair, in almost the exact same composition, with a direction from the Canadian public to continue our work to make sure that we are holding each other accountable to the highest standard of governance, of ethics, and of transparency and accountability. So that's what I'm here for. That's going to be my focus, notwithstanding the very important issues that have been raised around the table, and I certainly share an interest. In fact, I have a motion prepared to the same as it relates to AI. I'm very interested in that, but let's not get caught in a false dichotomy that we can't continue the important work of a retroactive view at what just happened over the last 2 years, particularly given the start and stop of the last session, which I should be of no reminder to the members around this table, was of no consequence of members of the opposition side. Certainly wasn't our choice. So if we had our choice, I think we would have continued the good work, and that's what I hope to do in this committee here today. Thank you.
Monsieur Villemot.
Monsieur Villemot, thank you. That's an interesting point from my colleague. Of course, you cannot act against virtue. However, this is a gigantic amount of work. So I think there should be a compromise. Maybe we could say, okay, maybe we could have 2 meetings on that matter. It's not a good idea to be against virtue, but it's not a good idea either to write a whole new report. So maybe we could have a minimal amount of meetings on that topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's been quite interesting listening to my colleagues and their views on this specific motion. I mean, the past 20 months, I think our government, in fact, just Team Canada, has done all that we can to ensure that Canadians are protected, that Canadians had the ability to stay at home while COVID raged in public settings, whether it was through CERB, whether it was through supporting small business, through the business account, through wage subsidies. I think it's a little surprising that there seems to be an automatic assumption of guilt that has been declared by a couple of our members here in terms of how we were able to support Canadians, hundreds and thousands of Canadians, to get through what has been the most challenging part of their lives, of their lifetimes, of our generation. We worked really hard, not just members on the governing side, but also members from all parties, to ensure that our constituents were well supported throughout this whole process. I think that we need to continue doing that. We realize that COVID is not yet over. Whether it's through C2, whether it's through other ways that we want to continue to support Canadians, I think that we should. And I think that we need to find that collaborative approach. We need to find that balance in the work that we do here in this committee to make sure that that Canadians are feeling supported, that Canadians are being supported. And the last thing that I think that our committee should be doing is to take this committee for political posturing, to take this committee to distract from the work that we've been doing, all of us, from all parties, over the past 20 months, to ensure that that as we continue to finish the fight against COVID, that we all lend our hand, that we work together and really try to move things forward. And I think that there are other more pertinent issues. As members have said, this one's been really hashed out in the 43rd Parliament. I think there are other issues that we should be looking at. And I think artificial intelligence, I think facial recognition, I think equity are huge topics that Canadians are very much concerned about. And we would be doing an injustice if we played into what I think may be political posturing. I think it would be an injustice if we played into stepping away from continuing to protect Canadians from this changing world, from the changing digital space, from the changing normal of what COVID has brought for us. So I would respectfully ask my colleagues, think about this, guys. We have an opportunity to move forward. We have an opportunity to do the right thing. We have an opportunity to really work on issues that impact each and every one of us every single day. And we can do that here in this committee. I would really encourage you to really work on those issues as opposed to rehashing things that have already been settled, to not participate in what is going to be a political posturing session. I think Canadians deserve better than that. Thank you.
Mr. Broussard.
I'm fine right now, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Fergus.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, once again, I would just like to underscore 2 points. First of all, this committee in the last Parliament adopted not 1, not 2, but literally had spent several meetings and dozens of meetings on this topic. We already heard a lot of witnesses. And we worked on a report in the last Parliament. And I would like to commend all of my former colleagues for their work. They worked in a very, it was a difficult subject, a difficult topic, but everyone worked together in a very collaborative manner, in a professional way. Everybody worked together on the committee. All of the members worked together to produce a report that was adopted by the committee. The report that was elaborated was a very lengthy report. There were hundreds of quotations, and there were more than a dozen witnesses. It was a very lengthy report. It was tabled at the House of Commons. And this was about 6 months ago, or less than 6 months ago. Since then, not a lot of things have changed. And I do remember at the time, the member for Leeds Grenville, a very honorable member, had proposed at the time that we should have just one more meeting, just one more witness to discuss the subject at hand. And that was in the month of November. That was in last November. And after that, we heard many witnesses. There were many additional meetings because one person said one thing and another said the other. And there was a difference between two statements, and things were being extended and extended. And I think we really exhausted all of the possibilities in that subject. A report has already been filed. It has been filed in the House of Commons, and I would like to invite all of my colleagues to read the report. I read this report very attentively. I was part of the committee that wrote the report. And I don't want to give you the impression that it was only the MPs. We should also underscore the excellent work of our analysts. And they did this in very difficult conditions. So, Mr. Chair, I know my colleague. He is very honorable, and I know that he's very sincere when he says that it would just be to study if there was anything that was novel or new, and if there's nothing new, you would move to something else. But I heard this in the past. I heard this in the last Parliament. And at the time, we missed the opportunity to talk about other files that are much more pertinent, and files that have a negative impact on Canadians. And now we're rather playing politics, and I think that if we really want to work hard, we want to get back to work. We want to work for the citizens of Quebec and of Canada. As an MP representing Quebec, this is really my first and foremost goal. And the work of a parliamentarian must be a pertinent one. It must be important and significant for our fellow citizens, and we have the opportunity to do so. Mr. Chair, I'm very worried. I'm scared that 2 years later, almost 3 years later, after having adopted the motion regarding facial recognition, I'm scared we're going to miss the boat once again. And as I mentioned, it will be only political games instead of talking about things that matter to Canadians. So I do hope, I implore my colleagues, please let us move something that is pertinent. If you insist, well, actually, I would like to invite you to read the report. And you could then give me an argument if you want to tell me why you think things have changed, if there are new aspects that should be studied by the committee. But we shouldn't waste our time here. We shouldn't waste our time on this issue. Once again, Mr. Chair, I do hope that you will listen to my very sincere plea. I do hope we will move on to more pertinent matters for Canadians. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. These subjects are very important, and you can't just pretend that they don't exist. However, I was listening to Mr. Fergus, who was talking about the report that was produced. I was aware of this report, but I didn't see an official reply that came from the government regarding that report. And I think this would enable us to understand a bit more about what is happening. It would be interesting for the government to reply before we go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I find it interesting that I think we've all acknowledged the size and scale of revisiting our lobbying legislation in a meaningful way, and yet there seems to be an appetite or a move towards limiting the application of this study to 2 days. And that to me is a contradiction, that if we're going to acknowledge the size and scale of it, that we should be considering this in a longer view. And maybe the 2 sessions that we have set aside for it will provide us with a framework to look at how we can elevate Canada's lobbying registry. Because I can share with you, Mr. Chair, and members of this committee and people who might be watching at home, that in my own research pertaining to issues of Canadian interest, I've had to actually go to this, I've had to pen and research the United States of America's lobbyist registry to find connections of Canadian lobbyists who have to report in a deeper way to Congress than they do to this House of Commons. That's a problem. We actually have a very weak lobbyist registry, in my opinion, and I think that there's an opportunity for us to elevate that and to create something that is more substantive. I don't think it's going to happen in 2 days. Maybe it doesn't happen in my lifetime as an MP. It's certainly going to be one of my pursuits, though. Having watched the comings and goings on government operations and procurement, I can assure you that there were questions that all Canadians deserve to have answers to. And I would hope that the government would be able to provide those answers in a meaningful way, or I would hope that, having learned from perhaps some of the gaps in our systems and principles in the previous session, that we can, as a committee, propose to the House of Commons ways in which we can strengthen up and shore up our lobbyist registry. I know that there's members around this table with subject matter expertise that I'm keenly interested in hearing, what their perspectives would be on this if they had a blank slate and we were able to draft from scratch, the gold standard of the lobbyist registry. What would that look like? Because I can assure you, from where I sit, there are significant gaps when we have to look to the south to find tougher legislation on lobbying, given the state of their affairs there. So if the compromise is that we go to 2 sessions, so be it. But I hope that the members of this committee have it within their purview, and their line of sight, ways in which we can improve our lobbying registry and our procurement practices to ensure that we are leading in that regard and not woefully lacking, which appears to be the case presently. Thank you.
Ms. Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Well, there will always be an innumerable list of important issues that we need to cover and explore, and in many cases rehash and review. I share my colleague Mr. Fergus's concern of us not getting to the matters of the day. In my own riding of York Centre, the digital space is a terrifying one. It's filled with hate. It's filled with anti-Semitism. It's filled with really insightful language that disrupts the lives of many, many constituents in my community who are asking us time and again, how do we as a government find the fine line in making sure that the freedoms of speech are available to every constituent in the digital space that they use, but at the same time, make sure that communities and their narratives and their sense of safety is there, not only in their day-to-day lives out on the streets, but also in the digital, how their information is accessed and who is seeing it, and so on and so forth. And we're not getting to those important conversations while the rhetoric and the temperature in the digital space continues to become hotter and hotter. And we're not really taking the time in this important forum to table those discussions. And I agree there are things that we could take a day here, take a day there, but something like AI, something like facial recognition, public access to information, how the digital space is used and how it moves forward to protect Canadians' information, but also protect them from these kinds of vulnerabilities, is something we haven't gotten to. And I really, really think it's an important time to do that. And when we take time going back over old reports that have been concluded, when we take time to tweak it a little bit more and look, we're not getting to the issues of the day that are keeping Canadians up at night, that are keeping members of my constituency up at night in terms of these platforms and how we create safe space for them. And I really would ask colleagues to consider that as we move forward in lining up what we are going to discuss here and what are the issues that our Canadians are not just asking, they're demanding this of us. Community after community is asking us to engage with what happens in the digital space, and yet we can't seem to get there. And these technologies are evolving faster than our discussions, I can assure you. And if we don't get to these matters of the day, I fear for what we're not serving Canadians well when we don't address these issues here in this forum. And I would really ask, good work was done last session by the colleagues at this table. Some of them are not here. I've read parts of the report. I haven't read it in complete length from first page to last page, but good work was done. But if we keep going backwards, we're not moving forwards on really critical issues that matter to our constituents today. And I'd be terribly disappointed to see that we fail them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Hefner.
Thank you. I just want to chime in as a new member of the government and a new member of this committee to say I agree with a lot of the comments I heard from my Liberal colleagues here. I particularly have some concerns about adopting a report I haven't read. I wasn't part of this committee last time. And so I look forward to reading it and to learning what this committee came to. But I don't think at this point I can support something that I don't know enough about at this point. And I agree also with my colleagues who are suggesting there are more important issues for this committee to address, like facial recognition and AI. I think those are top of mind for Canadians. They're something that Canadians are thinking about, more so than the Lobbying Act, frankly. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in there as a new member of the committee, just to say I do have concerns about moving forward on this motion.
Okay. Mr. Fergus.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, I have made my comments with honesty, and I've tried to convince you. You are in majority, so I have nothing more to add, so I would suggest that we go to the vote.
We still got speakers. Mr. Broussard and then Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all the intervention. I think we've had a good discussion, a very respectful discussion on this, and we've also talked, Mr. Chair, about the importance of moving on to some other issues, but I also think, and very important issues, by the way, privacy, facial recognition, and I understand that Mr. Green has a motion that I think is good for this committee to move forward on. But this is not about resubmitting or rehashing. This will inform the work that we do, not just now, but going forward. And I'll remind you again, Chair, that you know, much of this work was basically fell off the table as a result of the election. So there is a response from the government that can come forward. But understanding and listening to the debate of my respectful colleagues, I will suggest that we, if it's okay with you, Chair, that we move to study this. I'm going to suggest not more than 4 days so that we can move forward. So I would make an amendment to the motion.
Does Mr. Broussard have unanimous consent to amend his motion to add 4 days?
Okay. So
okay.
So I thought that would be a reasonable compromise, Mr. Chair, understanding the concerns that Mr. Green had about, you know, the seriousness of this issue, about the concerns that other members had as far as, you know, other important issues. So the motion is on the floor, and I'll leave it to your discretion, Mr. Chair, to.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really do appreciate, like Mr. Broussard, the comments made by all colleagues. I just want to quickly note something that Mr. Green had said with respect to the Canadian lobbying regime. I think Canada has one of the most robust lobbying regimes in the world. Especially, you know, it is one of the toughest. Our 5-year lobbying ban is really competitive in how it operates across the world. But as Mr. Fergus says, I think that we should be calling the question at this time.
Well, we have exhausted the speakers list, so we may now proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Is there a request for a recorded vote? Then we'll have a recorded vote.
Thank you,
Turn it over
Mr.
to the clerk.
Chair. So recorded vote on the motion moved by Mr. Brassard. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines, if you can unmute yourself and tell me if you vote for or against the motion moved by Mr. Brassard.
Madame la greffière, puis peut aussi baisser son micro.
Can you bring your boom microphone to the side of your mouth, please? Thank you.
I vote against.
Thank you. Monsieur Fergus.
Je vote contre.
I vote against.
Ms. Effner.
I vote against.
Ms. Khalid.
Je vote contre.
Ms. Sachs.
Je vote contre.
Mr. Brassard.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Kirk.
I vote in favor.
Ms. Rood.
I vote in favor.
Monsieur Villemur.
Je vote contre.
Mr. Green.
I vote for.
Yeas pour 4, nays contre 6.
Thank you. The motion is defeated. Now, before I go to Monsieur Villemur, I know that Mr. Green was next up. He had a motion that he wished to move.
Thank you. So in respecting that some of us are new around the table and that there have been 2021 annual reports that have come out, I have a series of opportunities for us to revisit the different commissioners. Would it be, Mr. Chair, through you to the committee, would it be wise for me to break them up or just to provide them all at once and allow people to vote on them individually?
I'm not sure I know the nature of your motion yet, so I
So,
don't
for
know
instance,
that I can,
my first motion is that the committee invite the Privacy Commissioner, Daniel Theron, to brief the committee on his 2021 annual report. Just to give you a context, I also have within this the Information Commissioner, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, and the Lobbying Commissioner, just to provide the committee with briefings on the 2021 annual reports.
Okay, so you're asking me if I think this motion should be bundled or voted separately. I would suggest that's entirely up to you as the mover and the will of the committee.
Okay, well, I'll put them together just for the expediency of the motion, and if people want to pick them apart, they are welcome to do that. I think it'll provide us with a good overview, and I'll read it as follows. That the committee invite the Privacy Commissioner, Daniel Theron, to brief the committee
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
on his...
The motion that I have in front of me is not what Mr. Green has is speaking about. I'm not sure if my colleagues that are attending virtually have a text of the motion as well.
I agree with you, Ms. Gillett. I have a different motion that's been circulated, but
my
I
apologies.
suspect,
I got my orders mixed
right,
up.
I was going to suggest
My order
that
mixed
maybe
up.
Mr. Green has another motion coming that is being circulated to you. So
Fair enough. I'll wait for that.
You are table dropping the motion on the, well, I guess verbally giving us the motion on the officers of Parliament. Or do you have that?
Yeah, well, I'll so that it can be circulated and there's no confusion, I'll go with the one that I think is before people, which is that pursuant to Standing Order 1083 H7, that the committee study the use or possible use of facial recognition technology by various levels of government in Canada, law enforcement agencies, private corporations and individuals, and that the committee investigate how this technology will impact the privacy, security, and safety of children, seniors, and vulnerable populations, that the committee examine the impact of facial recognition technology on racialized communities, and that the study include how this technology may be used nefariously, such as a tool for criminal harassment or for the other unlawful surveillance purposes, that the committee investigate any possible link, formal or informal, between Canadian law enforcement agencies and private technology corporations or startups, including, but not limited to, Clearview AI and Palantir, and that the committee examine the impacts of facial recognition technology and the growing power of artificial intelligence.
All right. So the motion, the committee has now heard the motion. It has been distributed in writing, and I hope that an electronic version is able to be sent to those attending by Zoom. I don't know if they've received that or not, have they? It does not appear so. The motion, though, is in order and was read into the record and translated, so it is in order. Go ahead, Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Chair, I'm very conscious of the time, and this is a really important motion. So I would just like to indicate that I think it's, I hope that we'll be able to dispense with this business before the end of the meeting.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Villamou.
The motion is very interesting. However, we should limit the scope, maybe 4 meetings. This is a very vast topic, and I think we should go to the most critical aspects.
All right. If there is no other discussion, perhaps I should be clear. You have proposed this motion. Are you moving it now?
Yes, I'm sorry. I am moving it, and I'm happy to ask for unanimous consent for the amendment of it to be no more than 4 meetings.
Is there unanimous consent to amend the motion that Mr. Green has read by adding the words to adding a maximum of 4 meetings? Anybody opposed?
Could I just ask one quick question of Mr.
All right, we're down to about 3 minutes left, so I'm hoping we can
Mr. Green, if through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Green if does this include does this study also include the notion of deep fakes?
Absolutely, that I think would be included under artificial intelligence.
Okay. All right. So is there unanimous consent to add the 4-meeting cap on the study? Yeah, yes, there is unanimous consent.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. I'm just wondering if 4 meetings would be sufficient to cover the topics that are in here.
Okay, I'll take that as no for unanimous consent then, and we'll.
Sorry, I'm not opposing. I'm just questioning members if they think that it would be sufficient, and if there's maybe 1 or 2 more meetings that could be added at the discretion once the study begins.
Monsieur Villemot.
En accord avec Madame.
I agree with Ms. Kelly. I propose an amendment for 6 meetings.
So if I understand correctly, you're moving that we have 6. So we will, if there's no discussion, we will proceed to a vote on the amendment to have a meeting of 6, and then proceed to the main motion. So let's see if we can get this done. Yes, Mr. Broussard.
Just a question of process. I don't think I've ever been involved in a study that has had 6 meetings. What, maybe through you, Chair, to Mr. Where would be the witnesses based on the study? I mean, you talked about the Privacy Commissioner. I'm sorry I had to step out of the room for some, you may have mentioned some other people, but.
Mr. Broussard, those are 2 separate issues. He was going to move that as a separate item, the hearing from the officers of Parliament. So that's a separate issue.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
I guess my question still is, Mr. Chair, like 6 meetings is a lot of witnesses. It's a lot of meetings. I mean, would 6 suffice? Would 4 do the job, Mr. Green? I know we're like.
Is that, am I okay to respond?
Quickly, yep.
Yeah, I believe that an amending motion is on the floor, and so I'll concede. I said 4 because that seemed to be what came from my colleague, and now that my colleague would like to expand and make it 6, and I believe he does have the motion on the floor.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion for a maximum of 6 meetings? Okay. It appears that the yeas have. Does anybody is there a request for a recorded vote? Okay. The motion carries. Now the main motion on the study itself. All those in favor of the main motion. It doesn't appear that anyone is opposed, and no request for a recorded vote, so that the motion passes. And thank you very much, everyone. I think with that, it is time. Meeting adjourned.